The NHL's break from the Four Nations Faceoff tournament is nearly over as the New York Rangers will make their return and play their first game back from the break on Saturday in a pretty meaningful one as well, because the Rangers only have 7 games remaining before the upcoming NHL trade deadline. And with that being said, those 7 games are more than likely going to be a potentially big factor in kind of what the Rangers ultimately decide to do at this upcoming trade deadline. If they're quite a few points back and go 2-5 in those 7 games, let's say, maybe the Rangers end up, not looking to be as much of buyers as, let's say, if they went 5-2. So these 7 games could play a pretty massive role in what this team ultimately decides to do at this upcoming trade deadline. And we're going to take a look at the upcoming schedule in those games and kind of really talk about that, as well as we'll take a look at some of the New York Rangers players that maybe really haven't kind of done quite the best job, or maybe haven't quite performed up to their potential so far this season, the expectations of us fans. So we'll talk about some of those players that kind of need to take that step up in their game and really need to be better, as well as we'll take a look at the Eastern Conference wildcard standings and the kind of Metro standings as well, and see where the Rangers kind of sit right now from their point of view, obviously on the outside looking in of the playoffs. So let's get right into it here and begin by taking a look at the NHL standings and where the Rangers currently sit. As right now in the Eastern Conference wildcard standings, the New York Rangers are in 5th place, but are not too far back of some of the teams directly ahead of them. The Boston Bruins in 4th place have 2 more games played than the Rangers and only 2 more points. The 3rd place team there, the Columbus Blue Jackets, they have 1 more game played than the Rangers and are only 2 points up, so the Rangers have that 1 game in hand. And then the actual wildcard teams there, the second wildcard spot right now is owned by the Detroit Red Wings with 55 games played, the same as the Rangers, but have 3 more points than the Rangers right now, 61. The Rangers have 58. And then the first wildcard team right now is the Ottawa Senators, who have 56 games played, 62 points. So 4 more points with 1 more game played. Again, the Rangers are not too far back, so they're definitely still in the mix here. They're right in that race, but it is definitely not going to be easy. It's going to be a really tough fight, and I imagine it's going to come down to, some of the last games of the season for most of these teams to really kind of decide who ultimately, gets these 2 spots in the wild card. So we'll see what ends up happening down the road, and we're obviously quite a ways away from that. But I think right now the Rangers just got to keep battling. I mean, they're still in the mix here. They're not far back at all, and they're not terribly far back of that 3rd spot in the Metropolitan Division either. Now, they're not close, but it's not like completely impossible. Right now, they do have 2 less games played than the New Jersey Devils, so 2 games in hand, and are right now 10 points back. So if the Rangers hypothetically won those 2 games in hand, let's say, they're 6 points back, and, with still over 20 games to play, 25 games or so to play, something around there for most kind of teams, that's not the craziest thing in the world to come back from. So it is possible that the Rangers can go on a heater here. Maybe the Devils go on a bit of a losing streak, as, they're 5-5 in the last 10. The Rangers are 5-4-1 in the last 10, so not a whole lot better. Maybe the Devils can kind of slow down a little bit more here, and the Rangers kind of heat up here over the next, 7 or 8 kind of games, and end up kind of really getting closer to the Devils for that 3rd spot in the Metropolitan Division. It definitely is possible. The team above the Devils are the Carolina Hurricanes, who right now have 56 games played, 70 points, so 1 more game played than the Rangers and are 12 points up. So going to be really tough to catch them, because even with that 1 game in hand that the Rangers do have, they'd be, so 10 points back. So quite a ways back still of them. Probably not going to catch the Canes for that second or obviously first spot where the Washington Capitals are, because they're way up there with 80 points already and have the same amount of games played as the Rangers. So they're 22 points back. No way they're catching the Capitals. Very unlikely they catch the Canes, and still fairly unlikely, not very likely they're going to catch the Devils, but they're definitely still the chance there. Obviously, Columbus still is in between the Devils and the Rangers for that 3rd spot there. They're that kind of 4th place team in the division right now, but still, the Rangers are in that mix for a wild card spot and possibly that 3rd spot in the division. So it's going to be a really tight race, I think, for most teams. Some over the next couple weeks here may start to fall off a bit there, whether it's, the Rangers, Columbus, the Islanders, maybe the Red Wings fall back a bit. There are a lot of teams that could end up falling back possibly of that wild card or division race, but I think right now the Rangers are definitely in the mix and are going to do whatever they can do, possibly kind of put themselves in a decent kind of spot to really compete for the playoffs, and that's kind of where I wonder how much of an impact these next 7 or so games are going to truly be for the Rangers as they kind of prepare themselves for the upcoming trade deadline. And I do think that these 7 games could end up having a pretty major impact possibly on what they ultimately decide to do at this deadline and kind of the path they decide to take. So let's take a look at the upcoming schedule for the Rangers before the upcoming trade deadline on March 7th. So the Rangers, like I said, have 7 games before the deadline, and the first one is on Saturday against the Buffalo Sabres. Then you've got Sunday against the Pittsburgh Penguins. Then Tuesday against the Islanders. Then you've got Toronto, Nashville, the Islanders once again, and then the Capitals. So those are the 7 games the Rangers are going to have before the upcoming trade deadline. And when you take a look at that schedule and those 7 games, there are some very winnable games. And the Rangers starting things off, with their return against the Buffalo Sabres and the Pittsburgh Penguins definitely could be a good thing. I mean, those are 2 teams who are not playoff caliber teams. The Sabres are way lower down than the Penguins, but the Penguins are looking like they're probably going to be sellers with some of the moves that they've already kind of made there, shipping off a guy like a Marcus Pettersson. So they're more than likely going to be sellers. And I think with where they're at, the Rangers definitely should be beating them. So ideally, the Rangers get off to a kind of 2-0 start there, kind of get into a 3-game winning streak from their, previous game way back on February 8th, where they won that against Columbus Blue Jackets. So if they can start off 2-0 here on their kind of return to the NHL, then going on a 3-game winning streak there, heading into a Tuesday important game against the New York Islanders, where that would be their 3rd game back, and they'll be playing a game against a team who the Rangers are fighting with as well. So that's definitely a game you want to try and win. Then you got the Leafs there, who's going to be a very tough opponent. Obviously not going to be an easy one, but you definitely want to try and come away with some points there. Then you got the Predators, who are obviously another bottom tier team, just like the Sabres are, so another very, very winnable game. Then you got the Islanders once again, who, they're not going to be a top tier team, but they're also not a bottom tier team either. They're going to be a tough opponent, obviously a rival, so that should be a good game there. But, again, you're competing with that team for a wild card spot and getting playoffs, so trying to get all 4 of those points there out of the 4 possible ones as they play 2 games in the next 7, I definitely think could be important there. And then you've also got that game against the Washington Capitals on March 5th to close things out before the March 7th NHL trade deadline, which will happen on that Friday. So the Rangers' final game is on March 5th, that Wednesday, and then that Friday, March 7th, will be the trade deadline. So the Rangers will have that, Thursday, Friday to really kind of focus in on the trades and moves they want to make, which, could be a nice little thing for them as well. They don't have to worry about that game, obviously. But either way, going to be a very interesting trade deadline for the Rangers. Are they going to make some buying moves, selling moves, a bit of both? We're going to have to wait and see. I'm definitely excited to see what moves could be made. Obviously, I'll have everything covered on this channel, so if you're a Rangers fan, definitely stick around for daily New York Rangers content. But we are not done with today's video, as we're going to carry on now and take a look at which New York Rangers players really need to kind of step up their game for the remainder of this season if the New York Rangers really want to compete for a playoff spot. So let's begin by taking a look at the goaltender Igor Shesterkin, who I think really hasn't played the greatest this season. He's got a .906 save percentage, a 2.87 goals against average, an 18-19-2 record. Just really not great overall. I think he's had a pretty disappointing season, and that's after getting a pretty major contract extension. Now, I am not quite out on Igor as a lot of Rangers fans may be. I mean, I'm not saying all Rangers fans are. By no means, that's not the case. But there definitely are quite a few Rangers fans who have their worries about this contract long-term and really don't like that deal that was handed out. And I understand that. I definitely can understand the worries of, paying a goaltender this much money. But I think the main thing with Igor, for what we've seen over his career, is, yes, he had that one elite season in the regular season there. Had that one elite one where he was that Vezina Trophy winner, was, up for the Hart there, was one of the top guys for the running in that. Obviously didn't win it, but was, up there in the running for it, up there in the voting. So this is a guy who, for the most part, though, has only really shown to be that truly elite guy come playoff time. And that's not a bad thing. I just think we see, obviously, a lot more regular season games. So Rangers fans see him play in the regular season there and obviously have not seen anything great so far this season. And I'm definitely seeing that as well. I mean, he has not played good. But the main thing is, come playoff time, he is a guy who has consistently proven to be that elite kind of a guy. He shows up when it matters most. And, I think until we see him really start to fall off in the playoffs, let's say, that's when maybe I'll start to get a little worried. But for now, I'm fine. I'm not worried about this deal. I think it's going to be okay going forward. Obviously, it hasn't looked great. It definitely has not looked good. He's been quite inconsistent so far this season. I think there's games where he looked great and it looks like that prime, Igor, but there's obviously other times there where he's not looking too good either. So he's up and down. He's been inconsistent, but I think for the most part there, he's going to be an elite goalie going forward. Is he going to consistently prove that in the regular season? Maybe not, but come playoff time, as long as he is still competing at that elite level, I'm fine with his numbers. But obviously, in the regular season, we definitely need Igor to step things up here and really kind of help carry this team along here and get into the playoffs, because he is a guy who this team relies on come playoff time. And right now, this team needs him in the regular season there because he is just not quite doing a good enough job. Now, is it all his fault? No, obviously the defense is not the greatest there. This team overall defensively definitely has its flaws and issues, but I think for the most part there, Igor definitely needs to step up his game. And I mean, a guy like Quick has also taken a bit of a step back, but he's much older, so I'm not going to really talk too much about Quick there because he is aging, a bit off. No offense to him, but he's getting up there in age for sure, so it makes sense why he's taking those steps back. But a guy like Igor, in the prime of his career, definitely needs to be playing a lot better hockey. And if we're being honest here, there are a lot of players that I could kind of spend, 2 or 3 minutes on each and kind of talk about how I think they should step up their game. Not going to do that for each of these players, but a guy like Artemi Panarin there, obviously, he is right around a point per game, and for his standards, that's just not what he normally does, right? He is definitely taking a bit of a step back this season, but that entire line has as well. If you haven't checked out my video yesterday, kind of talking about a bit of Lafreniere and kind of his line and kind of how they've taken a step back and how I think they really need to all kind of take a step up in the rest of this season to really kind of help project this team towards the playoffs there. I mean, Panarin around a point per game. Vincent Trocheck only has 37 points in 55 games played. Lafreniere, 32 and 55. They aren't terrible numbers overall, but what these players normally bring, they're just not quite doing it. I mean, I think Lafreniere's numbers aren't terribly far off what he normally does, obviously, but he hasn't taken that next step forward in his game, which we all kind of hoped he could. Then a guy like Trocheck, he is definitely taking a step back in his game. Same thing with a guy like Panarin, so I'm really hopeful they can turn things around. A guy like Fox, he just has not been the same for quite a few seasons now, unfortunately. I still have faith he is that kind of number one guy going forward, but he has definitely taken some major steps back in his overall play, which is disappointing and really just not great to see, but I'm still happy with him overall. I think he's a good player. It's just, from his normal standards, I don't think he's bringing as much as he normally does offensively or defensively, especially in his all-around game, not necessarily talking about the offensive game, but more just kind of all-around game defensively. He's definitely lacking a bit more normal, but I think for the most part there has been all right. Then you've got a guy like Mika Zibanejad, Chris Kreider. Zibanejad has obviously had his kind of decline over the past few seasons, but I think so far from what we've seen since him going to the wing there has looked a lot better. So there's some faith with him kind of really turning his season around there. And a guy like Chris Kreider, what are we going to get at him there? He's got, 16 goals, 4 assists, pretty wild numbers to look at there. You definitely don't see that very often where a guy has, 4 times the amount of goals that he does assists there. So pretty wild stuff out of Kreids there. Nothing too out of the norm, but definitely a little disappointing out of Kreids there to not be quite producing at that normal level he's normally at. And obviously just his all-around game also has not been the best. And defensively, I'm not going to talk about a guy like Ryan Lindgren there or Keandre Miller. I don't really see them kind of turning things around completely mid-season here. A guy like Lindgren's probably gone. Keandre Miller could also be as well, or very well could get re-signed. Obviously, that's definitely a possibility, but I'm not really expecting them to kind of turn things around completely and really kind of, help really kind of drive this team towards the playoffs there. Obviously, they've had some disappointing years, but I think for the most part there's not a whole lot of faith in those guys really turning things around, so not going to talk too much about them. And there's some other guys as well, but for the most part, I just think, this team as a whole has kind of underperformed. They definitely have proven to be a very good team in the past there. Has that been more on Igor kind of really carrying this team at moments? Absolutely. But I think for the most part there, this entire team as a whole, offensively, defensively, just overall has kind of taken a bit of a step back from previous seasons, which definitely is a bit disappointing. Anyways, that's going to do it for today's video. If you have enjoyed, definitely hit that like and subscribe button for daily New York Rangers content. And as always, definitely don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, as it definitely does help out the channel a ton. And I would really appreciate it. And also, definitely don't forget to comment down below your thoughts on the New York Rangers about to make their return to the NHL, about to play some more regular season games there, and are going to be really pushing for the playoffs there, so hopefully they can get the job done. Do you think they're going to get it done? Do you think they're going to make the playoffs? What are your thoughts about this upcoming kind of trade deadline and the games ahead of it? How much of an impact do you think these next coming games are really going to have on the decision to kind of path this team ultimately decides to take? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I'll catch you next one, and let's go Rangers.